Welcome to A Perfect Touch. I'm Jeanette. Vintage Pattern Lending Library number 1353. Ladies' hat, collar, gloves, and bag, circa 1934. The minute this pattern appeared in my search for additions to my 1930s wardrobe, I knew it was the perfect addition to extend my capsule wardrobe with these stylish accessories. There are 21 pattern pieces to create the 4 accessories. The fabric I'm using is a polyester spandex blend in a beautiful red to burgundy velvet. I begin by cutting all pieces for the hat, collar, and bag from the velvet, lining, and crinoline. The hat consists of 6 pieces cut from the velvet: flared trimming, upper left back crown, lower left back crown, right back crown, front crown, and brim. A patterned cotton is used for the lining, which consists of 2 pieces, upper hat lining and lower hat lining. A piece of crinoline is also cut for the flared trimming. One flared trimming piece is faced with the crinoline, and the 2 velvet pieces sewn together. The seam allowance is trimmed. The flared trimming is turned right side out and basted to the upper left back crown. Since there is going to be quite a bit of top stitching on this hat, I tested a sample to make sure I had the look I wanted. The seam allowance is turned in on the lower left back crown and then top stitched to the upper left back crown with the flared trimming already attached. The right back crown is attached using the same top stitching method. The back of the crown is now finished. A stay is cut from paper with all markings transferred. The upper edge of the front crown is sewn with a gathering stitch. The stay is basted to the front crown, matching markings, and gathering the crown as necessary. The paper stay is torn away. The finished front crown and complete back crown are now sewn together with the top stitching method. The flared trimming is subtle, yet outstanding. A gathering stitch is sewn along the lower edge of the crown. Crinoline is used to face one brim piece. The seams are sewn on each brim piece to create the circle. The right sides of the 2 brim pieces are placed together and sewn at the outer edge. The brim is turned right sides out. The entire brim is top stitched 1/4 inch from the outer edge and repeated all the way to the inner edge. A double layer crinoline band is created and sewn to the inner edge of the brim. The seam allowance is turned in on the lower edge of the crown. Matching markings and gathering as necessary, the crown is slip-stitched to the brim. Now the lining can be sewn. The back seam on the lower hat lining is sewn, and the upper hat lining sewn to the lower. The lower seam allowance of the lining is turned in, and the lining slip-stitched to the brim. In sourcing patterns, fabrics, and notions for the 1930s wardrobe, I came across a bundle of metal buttons. I placed 3 up the side of the hat, rolled the back of the brim upward, and this stylish hat is ready to wear. The collar is made of 6 pattern pieces. 1 is cut 4 times, 4 are cut twice, and 1 is cut once for a total of 13 sections. Since I'm making the collar and it's facing from the same fabric, I have 26 separate pieces. To keep them organized, I mark each with marker as they are cut. The pattern pieces from center back are a back inset, back, side back, and front inset, side back, side front, and front. Each piece is sewn to the next, leaving a 1/2 inch, the seam allowance for this pattern, open at both the upper and the lower edges. At this point, a bound buttonhole would be sewn to the collar, but because of the weight of the fabric, I'll make a buttonhole and use the same button as I used on the hat. Those pointed bits at the neckline are so fabulous. Now I'll repeat the entire process for the facing. All sewn seams are trimmed to 1/8 inch. The layers are pinned together for sewing. The neckline, right front edge, and lower edge are sewn, and the left front edge is left open for turning. The collar is turned to the right side, and a pointed wooden stick is used to fully turn the many points on both the neckline and lower edge. The left front edge opening can now be slip-stitched closed. With the buttonhole and buttons sewn, the collar is finished. The bag is made from 2 pattern pieces, the main bag and bag insets for the sides. I've cut those pieces from the burgundy velvet. The same pieces are cut from both the lining and crinoline. The crinoline is basted to the velvet. A strap is created from the velvet and crinoline, top stitched, and attached to the bag. The insets can now be sewn to the bag body. My insets didn't fit exactly right, so I just created a small pleat at the lowest point. When finished, the bag will close with 3 buttons. The lining is made from a patterned cotton and has a useful pocket attached. The bag lining and insets are sewn. The seam allowance of the upper edge of the lining is pressed inward. With the lining and bag wrong sides together and the upper seam allowances both turned in, the bag is pinned together and the upper edge slip-stitched closed. Now the bag can be top-stitched as desired. I top-stitched along the entire upper edge. Buttonholes and buttons, and the bag is finished. And here is where I changed plans for this pattern. I've made gloves before, and the pattern and instructions included look excellent. But I found the most fabulous black leather gloves with red stitching, and I knew these would be very fun in my 1930s wardrobe. In the patterns I had found was Wearing History R121 1933 hats, scarf, gauntlet cuffs. I decided to make reversible gauntlet cuffs to wear with the black gloves. I cut the cuffs from both the burgundy and a black velvet, adding an additional inch of length. Each cuff is sewn at its side seam, and then the 2 colors sewn at the upper edge, right sides together. The seam allowances are turned in at the lower edges, and the 2 parts of the cuff slip-stitched together. The additional inch I added allows me to turn back the upper edge for more variety. With a hat, collar, bag, and gauntlet cuffs added to the 1930s wardrobe, it's time to celebrate with something in the perfect color, a Virgil's Black Cherry Soda. The very first 1930s garment I made was an original 1933 design from Vintage Vogue pattern, V8686. I was treated to learning vintage techniques, bound buttonholes, lapped seams, and a detachable peplum with the very exacting instruction of a Vogue pattern. I wore the dress to a literary tea in the persona of Nancy Drew with a purchased vintage hat and bag. This make was also my submission in the Historical Sew Monthly Challenge for May 2015, Practicality. I demonstrated this by changing the accessories for a day to evening option. I have a dress diary for this make on my blog, and I'll share a link. Sadly, I sold the vintage hat and bag to help pay for the 1930s wardrobe and event, but I do still have the dress and the pattern, and I decided to use the peplum belt pattern piece to sew a belt to switch up this dress for a new look. The piece is folded in half, right sides together, stitched at the long edge, and turned right side out. The seam allowances are turned in at both ends and slip-stitched closed. A buttonhole is machine made, and the threads pulled to the back side and tied off. The buttonhole is opened, the button sewn, and the belt is finished. Vintage shoe shopping was a joy, and there were a lot of choices. These, by memory and Denmark, are listed as 1940s, but were very much like these beauties in what has become my go-to for 1930s vintage detail. They are such a fun color and style that when the sale happened to include these, I snapped them up. These are the Esther Vegan in burgundy. The perforated upper and velvet ties are stunning, and they coordinate well with my newly made burgundy accessories. Link provided.